brother is somewhere. Maybe he's right there, or right there, or maybe he's right here. You know, I was thinking about what to title today's video because I'm just going to get into our literary analysis of 1984 right away. But I was thinking of what I would title it, and what I wrote down here as a note was how to control the masses and herds of humanity. And the answer actually is easily and with their very cooperation. So there's a part in the story where Winston finally gets his hands on the fabled book, which is a book supposedly written by a man named Goldstein, who stood as a revolutionary against Big Brother and his tyranny and so on and so forth, right? He exists in this world as a proverbial enemy, and it doesn't even matter if he's real or not. All that matters is that he has the appearance of being real, because then he exists as a lure for, again, anyone who might be tempted by such a belief system to go against, the system as it is, right? Because again, I've been talking all along that Winston understands the how, but not the why. And eventually he learns more about the how, as well as he does learn the why. And it is a truth that does break him. And it also breaks Julia, because that's exactly what Big Brother being in your head or inside is. They're not content to, you know, just let someone die a heretic, or scream their disbelief, or to perpetuate it without retaliation. So anyway, Winston gets his hands on um, Goldstein's fabled book, and he's meeting with Julia, and she's a little bit less than enthused, but she's like, oh please, read it. So he goes on to read from what's titled Chapter 1, Ignorance is Strength. And this is what we're going to cover today. I'm going to try and do it in one video. It's kind of a long section though, so if not, I might just do a part 2 follow-up. All right. Chapter 1, Ignorance is Strength. It's hard not to read it without laughing. Orwell's pretty funny. So, throughout recorded time, and probably since the end of the Neolithic age, there have been 3 kinds of people in the world: the high, the middle, and the low. They've been subdivided in many ways. They've been born countless different names, and their relative numbers, as well as their attitude towards one another, have varied age to age, but the essential structure of society has never altered. Even after enormous upheavals and seemingly irrevocable changes, the same pattern has always reasserted itself, just as a gyroscope will always return to equilibrium, however far it is pushed one way or the other. Julia, are you awake? Said Winston. Yes, my love, I'm listening. Go on, it's marvelous. He continued reading. The aims of these 3 groups are entirely irreconcilable. The aim of the high is to remain where they are. The aim of the middle is to change places with the high. The aim of the low, when they have an aim, for it is an abiding characteristic of the low that they are too much crushed by drudgery to be more than intermittently conscious of anything outside their daily lives, is to abolish all distinctions and create a society in which all men shall be equal. Thus, throughout history, a struggle which is the same in its main outlines recurs over and over again. For long periods, the high seem to be securely in power, but sooner or later there always comes a moment when they lose either their belief in themselves or the capacity to govern efficiently, or both. They are then overthrown by the middle, who enlist the low on their side by pretending to them that they are fighting for liberty and justice. As soon as they have reached their objective, the middle thrust the low back into their old position of servitude, and themselves become the high. Presently, a new middle group splits off from the other groups, or from both of them, and the struggle begins over again. Or the 3 groups, only the low are never even temporarily of the 3 groups, only the low are never even temporarily successful in achieving their aims. It would be an exaggeration to say that throughout history there's been no progress of a material kind. Even today, in a period of decline, the average human being is physically better off than a few centuries ago. But no advance in wealth, no softening of manners, no reform or revolution has ever brought human equality a millimeter nearer. From the point of view of the low, no historic change has ever meant much more than a change in the name of their masters. By the late 19th century, the recurrence of the pattern had become obvious to many observers. There even arose schools of thinkers who interpreted history as a cyclical process and claimed to show that inequality was the unalterable law of human life. This doctrine, of course, had always had its adherents, but in the manner in which it was now put forward, there was a significant change. In the past, the need for hierarchical form of society had been the doctrine specifically of the high. It had been preached by kings and aristocrats and by the priests, lawyers, and the like who were parasitical upon them, and it had generally been softened by promises of compensation in an imaginary world beyond the grave. Right? Your paycheck's in the mail. Um, the middle, so long as it was struggling for power, had always made use of such terms as freedom, justice, and fraternity. Now, however, the concept of human brotherhood began to be assailed by people who were not yet in positions of command, but merely hoped to be so before long. Right? Why have so many people begun to concern themselves with stuff? Like here in America, for instance, that so many people are politically active and agitated, right? Why? You can assume that they don't have much of a daily life if their life revolves around concerning themselves with the largest power group in the world. It's funny how these things work. So nowhere was the concept of human brotherhood begin to be more assailed by the people who were not yet in positions of command but merely hoped to be so before long, right? The midwits. In the past, the middle had been revolutions under the banner of equality, and they had established a fresh tyranny as soon as the old one was overthrown. The new middle groups, in effect, proclaimed their tyranny beforehand. Socialism, a theory which appeared in the early 19th century and was the last link in a chain of thought stretching back to slave rebellions of antiquity, was still deeply infected by the utopianism of past ages, right? Most of you are friggin' delusional, right? You put your hopes in that other people will do the work for you, and you see that it's just not coming. But in each variant of socialism that appeared from about 1900 onward, the aim of establishing liberty and equality was more and more openly abandoned. The new movements, which appeared to be the middle years of the century, INSOC, Oceania, excuse me. The new movements which appeared in the middle years of the century, INSOC in Oceania, Neo-Bolshevism in Eurasia, death worship as is commonly called in East Asia, had the conscious aim of perpetuating unfreedom, that's capital U, capital N, lowercase freedom, and inequality, capital I-N, lowercase equality. These new movements, of course, grew out of the old ones intended to keep their names and pay lip service to their ideology. But the purpose of all of them was to arrest progress and freeze history at a chosen moment in time, right? Yeah, that's it. It's right. The world in a straitjacket. And you see that with all these nuts, right? Reality is statistical. People are happier all the time. People are better than ever before. Things are better than ever before. Everything is beautiful and nothing hurts. So on the familiar pendulum swing was to happen once more and then stop, right? The world in the straitjacket. As usual, the high were to be turned out by the middle, who would then become the high, but this time by conscious strategy, the high would be able to maintain their positions permanently. The new doctrines arose partly because of the accumulation of historical knowledge and the growth of the historical sense, which had hardly existed before the 19th century. The cyclical movement of history was now intelligible, or appeared to be so, and if it was intelligible, then it was alterable, right? Data, there's power in data. Information is power. Knowledge is power. Even rumors are power. Image is power. Fear and tyranny are power, right? Keep going. Okay, or appear to be so if as intelligible as alterable. But the principal underlying cause was that as early as the beginning of the 20th century, human equality had become technically possible. It was still true that men were not equal in their native talents and that functions had to be specialized in ways that favored some individuals against others. So let me repeat that. It was still true that men were not equal in their native talents and that functions had to be specialized in ways that favored some individuals against others, but there was no longer any real need for class distinction or for large differences of wealth. In earlier ages, class distinctions had been not only inevitable but desirable. Inequality was the price of civilization. With the development of machine production, however, this case was altered. Even if it was still necessary for human beings to be different, to do different kinds of work, right? Because who's going to do the job if no one else is there? Um, it was no longer necessary for them to live at different social or economic levels. And like I said, a lot of people, they'll say that money is necessary or morals are necessary. But if you listen to, in my case, if I listen to Americans, most Americans are always saying that police are necessary, government is necessary, more rules and laws and regulations, more medications, more institution, more control, take away more rights, take away more, it's just the way it goes, right? You see that the tendency is totalitarian. He goes on to get into it. Therefore, from the point of view of the new groups who were on the point of seizing power, human equality was no longer an ideal to be striven for, but a danger to be averted. In more primitive ages, when a just and peaceful society was in fact not possible, it had been fairly easy to believe it. The idea of an earthly paradise in which men should live together in a state of brotherhood without laws and without brute labor had haunted the human imagination for thousands of years. I think they called it heaven until they blew that dream apart. Oh man. It's like, how do you destroy a people, a family, a culture? Like, you blow it apart, obviously, right? The war machine. And this vision had a certain hold even on the groups who actually profited by each historical change. Their heirs of the French, English, and American revolutions had partly believed crime speak, right? These are all crime speak now, by the way. The heirs of the French, English, and American revolutions had partly believed in their own phrases about law and the like, right? They at least believed it, right? They weren't just power-hungry maniacs. Before the law and the like, and even allowed their conduct to be influenced by them to some extent. But by the fourth decade, right, and why would you cripple yourself though? But by the fourth decade of the 20th century, all the main currents of political thought were authoritarian, as what I was saying earlier, yes. The earthly paradise had been discredited at exactly the moment when it had become realizable. Every new political theory, by whatever name it called itself, led back to hierarchy and regimentation. And in the general hardening of outlook that set in around 1930, practices had been long abandoned, in some cases for hundreds of years. Imprisonment without trial, the use of war prisoners as slaves, public executions, torture to exact confessions, the use of hostages, the deportations of whole populations, not only became common again, but were tolerated and even defended by people who considered themselves enlightened and progressive. Oh man, talk about probably the biggest class of mental, emotional, and spiritual cripples to ever exist in history. When I say that the modern middle class is the most backwards class in history, and even the upper middle class, basically anyone who's educated enough to fight for power in our society and the way our society works, because right, violence is frowned upon. Um, at least any violence that doesn't belong to the state. Um, and then that's always in question too. It's just basically, it seems like everything's under attack at all times, right? Like, what values, what morals, what, it just depends what camera angle you get, and it depends who's telling the story. So increasingly totalitarian. It was only after a decade of national wars, civil wars, revolutions, and counter-revolutions, I think that's about where we're at right now, in all parts of the world that INCSOC and its rivals emerged as oh no, that was back when, fully worked out political theories. But they've been foreshadowed by the various systems generally called totalitarian, which had appeared earlier in the century, and the main outlines of the world which would emerge from the prevailing chaos had long been obvious. What kind of people would control this world had been equally obvious. The new aristocracy was made up of the most part of bureaucrats, scienticians, technicians, trade union organizers, publicity experts, sociologists, teachers, journalists, professional politicians, marketers, these people whose origins lay in the salaried middle class and the upper grades of the working class, right, midwits, upper midwits, had been shaped and brought together by the barren world of monopoly and industry and centralized government. As compared with their opposite numbers in past ages, they were less avaricious, less tempted by luxury, hungrier for pure power, and above all, more conscious of what they were doing and more intent on crushing the opposition. This last difference was cardinal. By comparison with that existing today, all the tyrannies of the past were half-hearted and inefficient. The ruling groups were always infected to some extent by liberal ideas, and they were content to leave loose ends everywhere, to regard, right, and they're increasingly making up for these mistakes if you haven't noticed, to regard only overt act and to be uninterested in what their subjects were thinking. Even the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages was tolerant by modern standards. Part of the reason for this was in the past, no government had the power to keep its citizens under constant surveillance. No, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. That never happened. The invention of print, however, made it easier to manipulate public opinion. No, that never happened. And the film and the radio carried the process further. No, fake news. With the development of television and the technical advance which made it possible to receive and transmit simultaneously on the same instrument, private life came to an end. Every citizen, or at least every citizen important enough to be worth watching, could be kept for 24 hours a day under the eyes of the police and in the sound of official propaganda. No, that never happens. With all those other channels of communication closed or left open, and let the chaos happen, and then deal with the fallout. And then from there, you'll have probably further excuses to eventually clamp down because, right, there's nothing that doesn't serve the party. Um, the possibility of enforcing not only complete obedience to the will of the state, but complete uniformity of opinions on all subjects now existed for the first time, right? Conformists, 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 conformists. After the revolutionary period of the 50s and 60s, society regrouped itself as always into high, middle, and low. But the new high group, unlike all its forerunners, did not act upon instinct, but knew what was needed to safeguard its position. It had long been realized that the only secure basis for oligarchy is collectivism. Wealth and privilege are most easily defended when they are possessed jointly. The so-called abolition of private property, which took place in the middle years of the century, meant, right, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. In effect, the concentration of property in far fewer hands. No, that never happened. Americans are richer than ever before. Statistically, they're wealthier than ever before. Their standards of living are up. No one kills themselves. No one dies from drug overdoses. Everyone's happy. So let's see. Wealth and privilege are most easily defended, right? The so-called abolition of private property. Again, own nothing, be happy. But with this difference, that the new owners were a group instead of a mass of individuals. Individually, no member of the party owns anything except petty personal belongings. Collectively, the party owns everything in Oceania. That never happened, because it controls everything and disposes of the products as it thinks fit. In the years following the revolution, it was able to step into this commanding position almost unopposed because the whole process was represented as an act of collectivization, right? World War II. It had always been assumed that if the capitalist class were expropriated, socialism must follow, right? There's the fables and the delusions, right? That even Winston unlearns in the face of what a government and a state really is, the modern corporation state. Factories, mines, land, houses, transport, everything had been taken away from them. And since these things were no longer private property, it followed that they must that they must be public property, and we own the copyright, right? Ingsoc, which grew out of the earlier socialist movement, inherited its phraseology. Right? It's horrible. It's a horror story. Don't mistake my laughter. As in fact carried out the main item in the socialist program, with the result foreseen and intended beforehand. Right? You'll own nothing. You'll be happier. The economic inequality had been made permanent. That was quite the trick. But the problems of perpetuating a hierarchical society go deeper than this. There are only four ways in which a ruling group can fall from power. Either it is conquered. Let's see. There are only four ways in which a ruling group can fall from power. Either it is conquered from without, or it governs so inefficiently that the masses are stirred to revolt, or it has allowed a strong and discontented middle group to come into being, or it loses its own self-confidence and willingness to govern. These causes do not operate singly, and as a rule, all four of them are present in some degree. A ruling class which could guard against all of them would remain in power permanently. Ultimately, the determining factor in the mental attitude of the determining factor is the mental attitude of the ruling class itself. After the middle and the present century, the first danger had in reality disappeared. Each of the three powers which now divide the world is in fact unconquerable, and could only become conquerable through slow demographic changes which a government with wide powers can easily avert. The second danger also is only a theoretical one. The masses never revolt of their own accord, and they never revolt merely because they are oppressed. Indeed, so long as they are not permitted to have standards of comparison, they never even become aware that they are oppressed. The recurrent economic crisis of past times are totally unnecessary and are not permitted to happen now. But other and equally large dislocations can and do happen without having political results, because there's no way in which the discontent can become articulate. As for the problem of overproduction, which has been latent in our society since right, the problem of overproduction, which has been latent in our society since the development of machine technique, it is solved by the device of continuous warfare, see Chapter 3, which is also useful in keying up public morale to the necessary pitch. From the point of view of our present rulers, therefore, the only genuine dangers are the splitting off of a new group of able, underemployed, power-hungry people and the growth of liberalism and skepticism in their own ranks. Because remember, they are liberalism as an institution. Liberalism institutionalized becomes its own protection at the expense of liberty, right? So that's exactly what this story is telling, how socialism never worked out once you put it into a state, right? If something is bad on paper, it's also bad in practice. Um, the conscience of the mass is needed only to be influenced in a negative way. Given this background, one could infer, if one did not know it already, the general structure of oceanic society. At the apex of the pyramid comes Big Brother. Big Brother is infallible and all-powerful. Every success, every achievement, every victory, every scientific discovery, all knowledge, all wisdom, all happiness, all virtue are held to issue directly from his leadership and inspiration, right? The corporation, the state, all the mythologies of a country and its ideals, right? Nobody has ever seen Big Brother. He is a face on the hoardings, a voice on the telescreen. We may be reasonably sure that he will never die, and there's already considerable uncertainty as to when he was born. Big Brother is the guise in which the party chooses to exhibit itself to the world. His function is to act as a focusing point for love, fear, and reverence, emotions which are more easily felt towards an individual than towards an organization. Hey, we here at such and such corp, from our family to yours, wait, what? Whose family? Like what? Uh, felt towards. Below Big Brother comes the inner party. Yeah, okay, we're good. Below the inner party comes the outer party. Oh wait. Oh no, wait. I missed an important part here. It's no, below Big Brother comes the inner party. Its number limited to 6 millions, or something less than 2% of the population of Oceania. Below the inner party comes the outer party, which, if the inner party is described as the brain of the state, may be likened to the hands. Below that come the dumb masses, whom we habitually refer to as the proles, right, the proletariat, numbering perhaps 85% of the population. In the terms of our earlier classification, the proles are the low, for the slave population of the equatorial lands who pass constantly from conqueror to conqueror are not a permanent or necessary part of the structure, right? He's talking about India, Africa, he gets into it, right? The Middle East. In principle, membership of these three groups is not hereditary. The child of inner party parents is in theory not born into the inner party. Admission to either branch of the party is by examination taken at an age of 16. Nor is there any racial discrimination or any marked domination of one province by another. Jews, blacks, South Americans, he said the word Negroes. South Americans of pure Indian blood are to be found in the highest ranks of the party, and the administrators of any area are always drawn from the inhabitants of that area, right? So he's saying that the party, the state, they're a diverse bunch. In no part of Oceania do the inhabitants have the feeling that they are a colonial population ruled from a distant capital, right? See, no one actually feels or thinks that way. Oceania has no capital, and its titular head is a person whose whereabouts nobody knows, except that English is its chief lingua franca, and you speak its official language. It is not centralized in any way. Its rulers are not held together by blood ties, but by adherence to a common doctrine. It is true that our society is stratified, and... One second, excuse me. All right, we're going on. It is true that our society is stratified, and very rigidly stratified on what at first sight appears to be hereditary lines. There is far less to and fro movement between the different groups than happened under capitalism, even in the pre-industrial age, because there was there was a lot up for grabs. So that fostered a lot of creativity and competition, so there was a stratification. To this present day in 2024, we do not have what was formerly known as class mobility, because where is there to go to, especially when everything is overpriced and inflated and about to burst. Anyway, but going on. Less to and fro movement because the different groups than happened under capitalism or even in the pre-industrial age. Between the two branches of the party there is a certain amount of interchange, but only so much as will ensure that weaklings are excluded from the inner party and the ambitious members of the outer party are made harmless by allowing them to rise. Right? Again, I told you, like, they'll give you HR jobs. They'll let you make a muck here, make a muck there. They'll give you your little controlled outbursts. They'll give you your advantages, but they're not going to give you real power. Proletarians in practice are not allowed to graduate into the party. The most gifted among them, who might possibly become nuclei of the discontent, are simply marked down by the thought police and eliminated. But this, right, it's like CIA or FBI. But this state of affairs is not necessarily permanent, nor is it a matter of principle. The party is not a class in the old sense of the word. It does not aim at transmitting power to its own children as such. And if there were no other way of keeping the ablest people at the top, it would be perfectly prepared to recruit an entire new generation from the ranks of the proletariat. So you see, they're ready to like kill off a whole wing and then create a new one. In the crucial years, oh, by the way, that's what a lot of coups and things like that are. They are like a more crude manifestation or representation of these what you would call leading instincts or class instincts, power instincts. Blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't need to be It doesn't need to be hereditary. It does not aim at transmitting power to its own children. It would be perfectly prepared to recruit. Blah, blah. In the crucial years, the fact that the party was not a hereditary body did a great deal to neutralize opposition. The older kind of socialists, who had been trained to fight against something called class privilege, assumed that what is not hereditary cannot be permanent. Right, I'll repeat that again. The older kind of socialists who had been trained to fight against something called class privilege assumed that what is not hereditary cannot be permanent. He did not see the continuity of an oligarchy need not be physical, nor did he pause to reflect that with hereditary aristocracies have always been short-lived, whereas adoptive organizations such as Catholic Church or Rome I added the or Rome, by the way, have sometimes lasted for hundreds and thousands of years, right? Assimilating the slaves, letting them keep part of their own culture, things like that come to mind. That again, these are all cruder models of the power instinct and power drives. The essence of oligarchical rule is not father to son inheritance, but the persistence of a certain worldview and a certain way of life, imposed by the dead upon the living. Right? So this is tyranny. This is the tyranny of the living today and the living of yesterday and all the witches burned through history and so many intelligent and creative people have had to deal with. The persistence of a certain worldview and a certain way of life imposed by the dead upon the living, right? So a ruling group is a ruling group so long as it can nominate its successors. The party is not concerned with perpetuating its blood, but with perpetuating itself. Who wields power is not important, right? The individual has no place in this world. There is no individual. It's just the party. And if you diverge from the center of the herd, you are just in any manner. Well, he gets into this, and I'll keep going. I'm getting excited here. So who wields power is not important. Right? It's just the body. It doesn't matter what body, any puppet. Provided that any parrot, any donkey, provided that the hierarchical structure, any animal, the hierarchical structure remains always the same. Slaves at the bottom, slaves at the top. All the beliefs, habits, tastes, emotions, mental attitudes that characterize our time are really designed, right? And when I talk about living in a prefabricated society, this is what I mean. Everything that people think and know came out of the last 100 years, is informed by the thousands before that, and then was curated and taught in largely factory farm school models, and again was fabricated and created by industrialists, capitalists, marketers. In the modern day, it's all sorts of corporate structures who continue to fabricate people's reality and language. All the beliefs, habits, tastes, emotions, mental attitudes that characterize our time, right, designed to sustain the mystique of the party and prevent the true nature of present-day society from being perceived. Physical rebellion or any preliminary move towards rebellion is at present not possible. From the proletarians, nothing is to be feared. Left to themselves, they will continue from generation to generation and from century to century, working, breeding, and dying, not only without any impulse to rebel, but without the power of grasping that the world could be any other way than what it is. They can only become dangerous if the advance of industrial technique made it necessary to educate them more highly But since military and commercial rivalry are no longer important, right, because there is no winning. The point isn't to win. The point is a permanent stalemate, a stasis of history and humankind and the destruction and control of the human mind. So they could only become dangerous if the advance of industrial technique made it necessary to educate them more highly. But since military and commercial rivalry are no longer important, the level of popular education is actually declining. The level of popular education is actually declining. I could read it one more time. What opinions the masses hold or do not hold is looked on as matters of indifference, right? At the most, it's seen as bad taste. Like, look at what the poor and stupid people believe. The earth is flat. How could they believe that? Right? And then they don't, again, like the lottery tickets and the beer. Like, like when you have like the midwits and they're like, I don't get it. Why are they buying lottery tickets and beer? That's not going to increase their 401k. How are they going to retire on lottery ticket, right? And they don't understand the value of a dollar for a fantasy, and they don't understand the true nature of the society in which they live. So since military, what opinions the masses hold, right? Again, no matter or no difference, it's usually it's sold under the guise of bad taste, or it's won't somebody think of the children, or the poor masses, people are spreading misinformation, don't we feel bad about the masses? No, you care about controlling the masses. Let's see, right? Why would anyone care about the masses, right? It's insane. And Winston's insane, and his society is insane. Do not They can be granted intellectual liberty because they have no intellect. And a party member, on the other hand, not even the smallest deviation of opinion on the most unimportant subject can be tolerated. Did you hear that? In a party member, on the other hand, not even the smallest deviation of opinion on the most unimportant subject matter can be tolerated. A party member lives from birth to death under the eye of the thought police. Even when he is alone, he can never be assured that he is alone. Wherever he may be, asleep or awake, working or resting, in his bath or bed, he can be inspected without warning and without knowing that he's being inspected. Nothing that he does is indifferent. His friendships, his relaxations, his behavioral towards his wife and children, the expression of his face when he is alone, the words he mutters in sleep, even the characteristic movement of his body are all jealously scrutinized. Not only any actual misdemeanor, but any eccentricity, however small, any change of habits, any nervous mannerism that could possibly be the symptom of an inner struggle is certain to be detected. Oh, we think you need help, right? We're beginning to see signs that you need help, right? And he has no freedom of choice in any direction whatever. On the other hand, his actions are not regulated by law or by any clearly formulated code of behavior. In Oceania, there is no law. Thoughts and actions which, when detected, mean certain death and are not formally forbidden, right? Thought crime does not entail death. Thought crime is death. The moment you stop conforming, you're already dead to the herd. And the endless purges I added that, but he goes on to say, thoughts and actions which, when detected, mean certain death are not formally forbidden. And the endless purges, arrests, tortures, imprisonments, and vaporizations are not inflicted as punishment for crimes which have actually been committed, but are merely the wiping out of persons who might perhaps commit a crime at some point in the future, right? This is A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, which I think was Minority Report with Tom Cruise and L. Ron Hubbard or whoever else it was, right? That, they basically came to go, hey, if we can read people's thoughts, we can just eliminate them, right? And now, and then in here we get to how language itself comes to, draw fierce, create those protective boundaries. So a party member is required to have not only the right opinions, but the right instincts. Many of the beliefs and attitudes demanded of him are never plainly stated and cannot, right? And this, if you understand this goes with culture anywhere this goes with culture anywhere in a lot of ways. A party member is required not only to have the right opinions, right instincts. Many of the beliefs and attitudes demanded of him are never plainly stated and could not be stated without laying bare the contradictions inherent in ingsoc, right? Don't make me say what I mean, right? What do you mean, dear ironist? You can't say what you mean? Oh my God, and this book is rife with tragic irony. And maybe that'll be the next video, the tragic irony of this book. If he's if he is a person naturally orthodox and you speak a good thinker, he will in all circumstances know without taking thought what is true belief or the desirable emotion. But in any case, an elaborate mental training undergone in childhood and grouping itself around the newspeak words crime stop, black, white, and doublethink make him unwilling and unable to think too deeply on any subject matter whatever. A party member is expected to have no private emotions and no respites from enthusiasm. Rah, 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 right? Got to keep the war machine going. He is supposed to live in a continuous frenzy of hatred of foreign enemies and internal traitors, triumph over victories, and self-abasement before the power and wisdom of the party. The discontents produced by his bare, unsatisfying life are deliberately turned outwards and dissipated by such devices as the 2 minutes hate, or in modern cultures 24/7 hate with news and media, fear and hatred everywhere, and the speculations which might possibly induce a skeptical or rebellious attitude are killed in advance by his early acquired inner discipline. The first and simplest stage in this discipline, which can now be taught even to young children, is called, in newspeak, crime stop. Crime stop means the faculty of stopping short as though by instinct at the threshold of any dangerous thought, right? Thought policing. It includes the power of not grasping analogies, of failing to perceive logical errors, of misunderstanding the simplest arguments if they are inimical to insight, and of being bored or repelled by any train of thought which is capable of leading in a heretical direction, or a creative or intelligent or funny or humorous direction, right? As Winston says in the story, like Big Brother doesn't, well, the proles and the birds sing. Big Brother and the party don't sing. They also don't laugh, right? Now everything's so serious over there, right? Because everything's the end of the world. Everything's either triumph or, right, it's either life or death. That's all it is. There's no in between, no emotions, no self, no range, no peak, no valley, just a dead middle, right? And they get there by cauterizing out the human heart and destroying and controlling and reconfiguring the human minds and patterns that are pleasing to Big Brother, which is the assertion of power, control, tyranny, all for its own sake. Winston doesn't understand. He understands the how, not the why. The why is torture. The why is tyranny. The why is cruelty. The why is humanity that is extinct and now running on a designed instinct, right? Or a born instinct that has been perfected through technocracy. Begins to sound prophetic, doesn't it? How many more pages we got? Well, the recording's at about 37 minutes. I think we'll stop here because the next part is really important with the language, and I don't want to just run through that, being that this is already a lot to cover. Crime stop. Let me finish this and we'll resume here a little bit later. Crime stop means the faculty of stopping short as though by instinct at the threshold of any dangerous thought. It includes the power of not grasping. It's being a dummy. Power of not grasping analogies, of failing to perceive logical errors, of misunderstanding, right? But in this world, smart, of misunderstanding the simplest arguments if they are inimical to insight, and of being bored or repelled by any train of thought which is capable of leading in a heretical direction, right? Anything artistic or creative. Crime stop, in short, means protective stupidity. But stupidity is not enough. It's not enough to be stupid. On the contrary, orthodoxy in the full sense demands a control over one's mental processes as complete as that of contortionist over his body, being an actor. What have I been going on and on and on about, especially in American society, a society of actors, where even the spectators imitate the actors. Everyone's a cheap imitation of another imitation of a man who's not even there. Who's Big Brother? He's your absentee leadership. North Korea at least has Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il. They're at least real. Here it's just Uncle Sam. It's just fiction. It's marketers. It's design. It's fabrication. Prefabricated society, way of life, a manufactured scarcity of goods, an intentional warfare at all times, with a few short, brief days or in hundreds of years of existence, a few short years, singular double-digit years of peace and hundreds of years of war, right? You see where this is all going? Oceanic society rests ultimately on the belief that Big Brother is omnipotent, right? This is basically, you could see this as monotheism's ultimate conclusion, as predicated on a technocracy where instinct was made apparent through data and technology, to where they could then create they could create a God, and the God was a society that had no individuals, because every individual is a threat to God. In this case, Big Brother. In America's case, the state, right? The party, in an increasingly nihilistic secular society, right? There is no universal God, there is no singular God, but there is one apparent power, and its consequences are very real. Examples are made, more examples will be made. History will continue to stand still as it's written and rewritten. And on the next video, we'll continue with why ignorance is strength, right? We understand the how, we're understanding the why. Talk to you soon. Thanks for your time and attention. Please like, share, subscribe. And, I'm Zach Morkowski, Sharper Pen Image Consulting, in our literary analysis series. This is George Orwell's 1984. Take care. Have a good day.